Hello and welcome to Wisdom Bites. Hope you're well. Thank you once again for joining us. Very much appreciated. And in today's packed program, I'm going to be having a look at the first signal which may well have fired now, which is giving an indication that we may well be on the way to retesting the $73,000 all-time high. It's the signal that most people seem to be ignoring. And while there's still a lot of challenges and difficulties ahead before the price can get to the 73,000, we may well have seen the first signal to retest the 73,000. So that's the question we're going to be having a look at. I'll also be having a look at the wider markets in terms of what's going on in the news, what's happening with the wider markets, and obviously there's a little matter of the FOMC meeting on Wednesday to decide the interest rates. So if that sounds interesting, then without further ado, get yourself a cup of tea, sit yourself down, eyes on the screen, and let's get cracking. But before I begin, the usual polite reminder, please remember everything in my videos is just for educational purposes, so please always do your wider research before you make any investment decisions or any swing trade decisions. Okay, before I have a look at the signal, which seems to be giving us some sort of an indication of where the price may want to go for Bitcoin currently, I'm going to be having a look at the last cycle because the current cycle seems to be rhyming with the last cycle that we had. So going back, and I showed you this in the last few videos, that once we came up with a very big powerful move up to the 14,000, we were making these lower highs and lower lows until we got to the COVID situation here, which was the final low. And then all of a sudden, we came back up to retest the previous high here. And as we did that, we made a new higher low at this point. So instead of coming back down and retesting this level or even going below it, what the market did was very quickly turn back up, making a higher high from this point. And that was our signal here that we're now in the parabolic phase of the bull market. So this particular pattern seems to be repeating in the current cycle. So let's have a look at what's happening. So we can see the similarities with the current cycle now, because having topped out at 69,000, we went into this bear market mode here until we got to 15,400. And just like here, after the bear market of the 2018, we got a massive rise very, very quickly to the all-time high at this point at 73,800. And the similarity here is that we got a big move right back here. And this was only up to 14,000. Whereas this move was to 20,000. So we made actually a lower high here, whereas at this point we made a higher high. But as you can see, since then, we're following the same pattern over here, just like we made here in 2019 and 2020. So let's have a quick look at this point here, which seems to be repeating this particular pattern over here. So this is what we've got at the moment. We've got the 73,800 high. And since then, what we've been making is a series of lower highs along here. And the last high that we've got is at 65,000 when we came up to this level and got rejected one more time. And on the other side, we've got the lower highs all along here, culminating in this big, very important candle, the Dragonfly Doji candle. This is the one I mentioned at the time, telling you how powerful this is and why this buy up is a signal to the upside. So this was the last lower high that we got. And maybe this was the first signal that we're making a reversal. But the real first signal is this one here. Because 2 weeks ago, we made this first higher low at this point. So we're now going in this direction. So this is the first sign. The actual sign will be when we break above, firstly, the 60,000, and then eventually the final confirmation of this trend reversal is going to be when we get above the 65,000. So this is the key level here, 65,000, because that would then break this series of lower highs at this point. So this would be the first break up, because at this point, this will be our first test of the 70,000 and eventually the 73,000. So let's see what happens. And of course, we always have to look at the downside risk. Just because it's made a higher low at this point, it doesn't mean it's now guaranteed to go and test the 73,000. This is just the first signal. And if we were to reverse from here and take this out here, then obviously we would then be in a continuation to the downside. So we just got to be always aware of the downside risk while following the signals which are telling us that this is more than likely, with a higher probability, wanting to move to the upside. And those of you with a keen eye will have noticed something very important in terms of the candlestick formations. And that is that at the bottom of a trend here, what we've got that closed yesterday on Sunday is a outside bar bullish engulfing candle. So this is what really has confirmed that this is a higher low from here, because we've now got a candle whose body is much bigger than the previous red body here. So we've got an outside bar bullish engulfing candle, which is giving us the signal that we're going to go further up at the moment. Now that doesn't mean it's going to go straight up. We're going to get some pullbacks along the way here, as there are some challenges. As you can see, the first challenge is this one here at 60,000, because if you look left here, there's been an incredibly strong support around the 61,000. So this is going to be a monumental task to get above here. But this dragonfly doji candle is really playing out very well to the upside, creating a higher low and then a move to the upside. So let's see where that gets to. Always take a balanced view that while the probability is to the upside, we must not take our eye off a lower level here. And as you know, there are always going to be, at any one time, whether it's in a bull market or in a bear market, there will always be both bullish and bearish scenarios, and you can make up your own mind on that. And so far, with that bullish case, we've also got a very bullish scenario which is playing out on the monthly time frame. And I've been mentioning this for many, many months as we were coming up here and then consolidating. What we've got is a cup and handle pattern which has a high probability to break to the upside. So this is what we're waiting for, and everything seems to be looking well and healthy and rosy here. And this particular pattern, if we look at what's going on in the wider markets, you'll see that this particular pattern that we've been talking about is now also being mentioned here. So this is just from yesterday. Some of the analysts are now realizing that we now have a setup for the targets of, according to them here, not my prediction, but their prediction of 150,000 by 2025. So what they're saying is that we could well get 150,000 by 2025. That means at the end of 2024. And what they're really suggesting is an explosive move to the 100 to 150,000 over the coming months. So let's see if that plays out, but certainly that pattern seems to be giving us the sign and the signal that we are going to be moving more to the upside rather than the downside. So while being aware of the downside risks, we have to try and ride the market as far as we can, because the signals and the signs and the indicators are giving us that hope and that confidence. And if we scroll down here, you can have a look at that pattern much more closely here. So this is what we're really aiming for. Whether it plays out, only time will tell. And if we move on to the Bitcoin liquidation heat map, we're getting a certain range which may well be playing out in the short term. So while I've just shown you the larger term picture, we always need to have a look at what's coming up in the coming days and weeks. And what we've got with the liquidation heat map is giving us where the leverage players are putting their stops, to the top side and to the bottom side. So this is the range you can expect at 57,900 on the lower side, and we seem to have met this top target here, as you can see with the price action, and that was at 59,100. So it seems to be a narrow range, and that may well be playing out until Wednesday, when we have the FOMC meeting to determine the interest rates and where the direction of the markets are going. And looking at the possibilities of those interest rate cuts, you may well have noticed that since the CPI data came out last week, the possibility of a 50 basis points cut has been rising steadily over the 25 basis points cut. So this figure was around about 25% at one point last week. And then we had the producer price index, as well as the initial jobless claims total. And the fear that we may well be heading for a recession is causing the analysts to think that the Fed may well take the dovish view and actually reduce the interest rates by 50 basis points rather than the 25 basis points. But let's see what happens with the markets. And the question is, will that become a sell the news event? We'll have a look at some of those types of scenarios a little bit later. And if we move on to the ETF overview, you may recall last week I was showing you these figures on the 7-day time frame. This was virtually all red. And now you can see that all of a sudden there's now starting to be a much more inflow into the ETFs. So while we still expect the GBTC, the Grayscale Trust, to be bleeding, which it still has, still lost about 1,641 over the last 7 days, and BlackRock picked up about 159 of those, but you can see that ARK seems to be increasing its inflows by nearly 3,000, more than making up for the losses here. And you're also getting the bitwise at just over 1,000, etc. So you can see that the green figures are now replacing the red figures. And it's only a matter of time, when you think about it, that what we've had so far is that we've had the German government selling, we've had the USA government selling, we've had the Grayscale Trust selling, and also the Mt. Gox selling. So we've had a huge amount of selling over the last many months. And the question I want to pose to everybody is that when all of that is going to stop, and most of it has now stopped, we've still got the Grayscale continuing, but what happens when there is very little selling pressure? And that seems to only point to one direction, and that is that on the balance of probabilities, we should be looking forward to a parabolic move in the Bitcoin price. And of course, there are geopolitical situations out there which could stall that parabolic move, and we just always have to be aware of that. But in the absence of that, we can only go by what the current situation is telling us. Okay, I'm going to move on to the wider markets and have a look at the SPX. And while there's been a lot of bearish sentiment out there, people thinking that this is a double top, and while that is obviously on the table, we have to always not discount that. But if we look at from where this market started, which was at the end of 2022, just like Bitcoin had bottomed out here, the SPX also bottomed out. But if we really look at the overall bigger picture, we have to just be aware that on this bigger time frame, just like I've been showing you with Bitcoin, we have to consider these higher highs that we've been making all along here, as well as the higher lows, as we can see here. So in the basis of that, we have to assume that this market has a continuation to the upside until something tells us that this is going to the downside. And if we look at the 60-day cycle on the SPX, and we have been following this very closely, we've made so far a double top. Just like Bitcoin, we seem to have got to these 2 points here, and now the SPX is going up there to retest the previous all-time highs here. And maybe this is giving us a clue what Bitcoin is about to do. And only time will tell. But so far, as we said, into the midpoint of this cycle, we would expect a fall down, which is exactly what it did, just exactly to the level that we identified here at this point. So if this was going to be a bear market scenario, which is obviously going to be possible, then this would have given the option here to make a lower low here. But what we've got is another higher low from which we've actually bounced up, as you can see. But we're coming into the midpoint here, and this seems to be well timed with what's happening on Wednesday with the Fed. So we have to be aware that we could actually have a triple top, and that on Wednesday this may well become the sell the news event into the midpoint here. And it could come back to these levels as the midpoint cycle bottom before we run into the end of the cycle. So I wouldn't be expecting at the moment anyway for a break up to the all-time highs as we're coming into the midpoint of this cycle for the SPX. So what I would expect is some sort of a pullback from Wednesday and then a move back up into the end of the 60-day cycle low here. So while we have to be aware that this could well be a triple top, and we may not make all-time highs here, we have to be considerate of that. But since we're making the higher lows and the higher highs here, the current situation has to be, the status quo has to be, that there is a much greater chance of an all-time high rather than a lower low here and a bear market to the downside. So we must always keep a balanced view of what's going on in the markets here. And maybe gold is giving us a very good clue. We're just having a breakout this month for making another higher high on the gold price. As we can see, we seem to be marching on much higher with the gold. And this is the monthly chart, But if we have a look at the weekly chart, we can see quite clearly that we've broken this consolidation, which we've been talking about for many, many weeks and months. And this was what we were looking for, to break this gravestone doji candle. This is what was directing and conducting the price action here. And we needed to break above that convincingly. And we've done that with this green candle here. And after a little bit of consolidation and a bull flag, we've now broken out and closed last week with a big massive Marubozu candle here. And already we've broken the high of this candle with the current candle at this point. So if we look on the daily chart, we'll see that having broken this consolidation pattern, we've also gone above it and retested this level at this point. And it may well be that we come back and retest the previous high here. So I would be expecting some sort of a pullback either into this level to retest that level, or at the bottom here, and that would be about 2,400 before we march onwards and upwards here. So all looking very good with gold. And if we have a look at silver, you can see that silver is doing very similar. All of a sudden this month now, we're getting a very strong green candle to the upside. And when we have a look on the weekly time frame, we can see that this is wanting to go much higher. So what we got in the previous 2 months was these indecision candles here. But they had wicks to the top and wicks to the bottom. So there was an indecision whether it would want to go up or down. But the last month's candle here, this is virtually the dragonfly doji candle with a longer wick at the bottom, meaning that the demand is being bought up very strongly here. So this was our clue that this was going to come to the upside here. And if we look to the weekly time frame, this seems to confirm that we've now broken above this neckline with the close yesterday of this very strong solid green candle. So it looks to me we're going to retest this level here very shortly at around about 31.7, and with the momentum that's been created with a new higher low here, it looks like we may well be testing this very shortly at around about the 32 mark, 32.5. So it's a green light for both gold and silver to be marching on. So while gold has made a new all-time high, silver seems to be following suit here. And if we move on to the dollar, what we can see quite clearly, as we've been mentioning, that this is the most likely support level, and this is exactly where the dollar has come back. But at the moment, as you can see here, quite clearly, we're making a double bottom. Now, if this breaks through, then this is the level that you can expect at around about 99.5. But after a long period of falling, you would expect somewhere along the line to have a counter trend bounce to the upside, maybe to these levels here at around about 102, before continuing with the lower lows and the lower highs here. So it may well be on Wednesday, if the Fed is quite hawkish, this may have a little bounce to the upside. But if it gives a 50 basis points cut, i.e. being dovish, then we could see a further fall and retest of these levels here. So let's see what happens on Wednesday, but certainly it's all setting up to make some interesting moves here. Okay, moving quickly on to the 60-day cycle, what we've really got at the moment, and we just have to be perfectly balanced with this, and that is quite clearly the dominant trend is to the downside. We've been making all these lower highs along the way here, right up to this point, and this trend hasn't broken yet. The first sign of that to the upside will be when we break above the 65,000. So this dominant trend of the lower lows here as well, we've seen the first sign, as mentioned earlier on in the video. This is the first sign that we've got of a move to the upside. But we won't be able to confirm the end of this current cycle at day 63 here. We won't be able to confirm that until we get above this level here at about 62,000. So we really need some confirmation here, which we didn't get because it's been rejected one more time. So this is the current picture as we have. So having made a day 63 bottom tentatively, and the top of this candle was at 56,900, and since we broke above it and confirmed much higher levels, so the first sign of the confirmation of this cycle is in, but we do need confirmation to break above the 61,000. So once we've done that, that bottom is in, and we're going into the midpoint here. So whether we go and retest this level, at least the 70,000, if not the 73,000, we should be expecting some sort of a pullback into the 60-day mid-cycle point here. So if we can move above the 65 here, then you would expect that to be the retest level before moving on to higher levels. And this is where that retest will come towards the end of this 60-day cycle. So we're currently looking at around about the 5th of November for the 60-day cycle. And we've still got another 3 more weeks to go. But it's in this latter part that we should be expecting some sort of a retest of this level here between 70 and 73. And finally, for those of you who are following our portfolios on the private member section, which covers the Bitcoin miners, which are a leverage play for Bitcoin, i.e. when Bitcoin goes up by a certain amount, the Bitcoin miners historically have gone up by a multiple of between 3, 4 or 5 times and even more, as we've seen in the last cycle. But also on the downside, when Bitcoin price goes down, the Bitcoin miners go down by a multiple of 2, 3 times. So this is the nature of the volatile area that we're in with the Bitcoin miners. So for those of you who are new to the channel, we started the private member section at the beginning of 2023 with a starting capital of around $100,000. And that was with a portfolio of about 5 or 6 Bitcoin miners. And at the end of 2023, that 100,000 ended up at $434,000. Now we used this capital to start a trading portfolio at the beginning of 2024, and the trading portfolio really consists of a handful of miners where we do ratio trades in between them. So what we do is we look at the ratio charts and look at which miner is going to outperform in the short term against the other miners. So while we've got a leverage play on one side, we've also got ratio trades moving funds from one miner to the other, trying to catch their tops and the bottoms. So for those people who are interested in the miners, please remember this is a very volatile area, and if volatility is not your game, so obviously the membership will not be for you. But if you're looking for an opportunity for a leverage play on the Bitcoin price, then the current pullback that we've had with the Bitcoin miners of around 60-65% presents an incredible opportunity. This is what we got here with that opportunity, because they were really, really down. That's the time to get in, not at the time when they've gone up by 100, 200, 500%. So our target is 5 million at the end of this bull market. So we're still expecting a continuation of the bull market and the final phase called the parabolic phase to come yet. And this is what we're waiting for with the Bitcoin miners. So as the pullback has brought the miners down by 60-65%, this has been an incredible opportunity to actually dollar cost average in to catch the upside. So if I give you the example of CleanSpark, what we've got here with CleanSpark, when the Bitcoin price bottomed out at 15,400, the majority of the major miners also bottomed out at the end of 2022. This is where we started the Bitcoin miners private member section. And since then, you can see with CleanSpark, while Bitcoin went up by 300%, CleanSpark went up by 13 times, i.e. 1,300%. So this is where the leverage play is for these miners. And for those of you with a keen eye, will know that the actual time to pick up these miners will be when you have these big massive pullbacks to the downside. So every pullback has actually meant a big move to the upside, as you can see here. And this is where we are currently. We are at about a 60-65% discount to the market. So as long as you believe that there is a parabolic move to come to the upside, then historically, if you look in the last cycle, from the previous pullback of the bear market there, this was the big massive move to the upside that even CleanSpark got at that time. And CleanSpark was not one of the major miners in the last cycle, but this cycle it is. And this chart pattern is being repeated with all the other Bitcoin miners. So the time to get in with the Bitcoin miners is not at this point or this point or this point, which unfortunately is when people will get interested. When we get above here, this is where the majority of people will join the private member section and get interested in the Bitcoin miners. Because just to get to this point here, the previous all-time high, if you see here with Bitcoin, where we are currently at 59,000, to get to the 73,000, Bitcoin needs to go up by 24%. Whereas the majority of the Bitcoin miners, like CleanSpark here, from where they are now currently, they have to get up by about 160%. So you can see quite clearly that leverage play is providing an incredible opportunity. So this would be the time to have a portfolio of the Bitcoin miners if you believe this is a bull market. And if you want to join us, you'll see that below every one of my videos, you have the join button here, and also in the description box, you've got another join button here. And when you click on that, you'll see for the price of a coffee per week, you can join the Bitcoin Miners Club, where we cover 2 videos per week, which is on a Wednesday and a Friday, where we look at developing our portfolio as well as developing the ratio trades. We're currently in 2 ratio trades, which have just only got going. So we're expecting those 2 to mature and flourish over the coming weeks. So what we cover is in this membership tab, and you'll see that we do a market update every single night at the end of the closing day and look at exactly where Bitcoin is and where the Bitcoin miners are, and all the relevant information, all the relevant updates, any articles, any charts, and giving us clues as to where the market is heading for both the miners and Bitcoin. So this is what we do in the Bitcoin miners section. And if you've got any comments or questions, then leave them in the comments below. Okay, so we'll leave it there. I hope you found value in the video. If you did, then please do remember to like and to subscribe if you haven't already done so. If you've got any comments, leave them in the comments below. Until the next time, take care, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.